Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be teaching you how to paint a watercolour landscape as part of my watercolour landscape painting series. Here's a little look at the painting we're going to be creating today. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe and comment letting me know exactly what you thought. Now let's get straight to the watercolour tutorial. To begin with, for this painting, I really wanted to focus on the building that you can see on the right hand side of the reference photo, mainly because this is at the forefront and I do think this is the main feature, that key defining part of this painting. It really makes it stand out and it's such a beautiful piece of architecture that I really wanted to get in there. Even though this isn't nature based and something that I'm used to, it was something I really enjoyed painting due to how unique it was. So looking at the reference photo, the top of the building has that pointed part to it and it's got lots of these little disc-like elements. So I painted these in to begin with a nice dark brown. I only painted the bottom section of these and then I went in later on with a lighter colour and filled in the top, so you've got the different shades that contribute to the top of the building. And I really took my time with this as it's a very small part of the outline. You can find the outlines down below in the description. There is one for printing out to paint straight onto watercolour paper, and there's also one that's darker that you can print out and trace yourself if you wanted to. Both of these just make everything a little bit easier and you can really jump in and begin the painting without having to worry about getting the outline right as it's been done for you. Use the same dark brown to paint the structure of the roof. So the bottom, you can see there's a little dark strip in the reference photo, the arches at each corner, and I wanted to make sure I got that in there just for the general shadow to begin with. And the key element to painting buildings is keeping everything as neat as possible. So you want to really take your time, and practicing control for this is definitely essential. You can get the lines a lot smoother once you've nailed that control, and it's also just going to keep everything a little bit neater if you've got that, which is really important, like I say, for painting buildings. Then I mixed some blue, white and a little bit of brown to create a nice cold grey, and I use this to actually paint the roof, and it's divided into two sections for each floor. So you've got the 4 roof sections and the 2 elements to that where you've got the arch and the 2 corners meet in the middle. And this is angled in a way that can be quite difficult to spot at first, but if you do just look at the reference photo, you'll be able to see what I mean by this and then map in each section individually. So I focused on the right hand side to begin with, let this dry and then painted in the left hand side of that roof section. And it's a really small element, but I do think separating it into 2 areas just helps with the shadow, as you're allowing one area to dry and then going back into the next section, if you will, so they're not just bleeding together. And I also use this grey to fill in the rest of that top section where you've got the pointed area I mentioned at the start that I filled in with the dark brown, and that just ties everything together up there. I also created a red with a little bit of brown just to dull the vibrancy a little bit. Yes, I still wanted it to be red though, so I only added a really small amount of brown anyway, as it's a very overpowering colour. And I followed the outline a lot with this red, getting it into all of the detailed areas, mainly for the rest of the building. I think red is the most important colour for this, as if you look at the reference photo, there is a lot of that vibrant red colour. And the key is to do a lot of little lines, so if you're struggling to know where to put the red, lines to map in windows and straight underneath the roof, I would say is the most important part of this section. And again, as long as you're keeping all your lines very clean, neat and tidy, you can't go wrong with this. It just requires a little bit of time. I then created a yellow. I used yellow with a drop of red, again to dull the vibrancy, as the yellow on its own was actually quite cold and more of a lemon yellow. And I used this to fill in the windows, mainly on the right hand side, as these were more vibrant in the reference photo, and the ones on the left I actually used a little bit of grey. This is all just to do with the angles, so if you look at the reference photo, everything on the right where you've got them bright bright windows is because it's more of the forefront, and then the ones that get a little bit duller, they're just curving round a little bit more, which is why they'll be doing that. And the main thing to remember for painting the building is to let things dry and then jump back in. So it does look like I'm painting things all over the place. It doesn't look like I've got really a method of working. I'm just going wherever I wanted to, but it is strategically placing the paint so that things are allowed to dry and you've not got the yellow bleeding into the red or the grey bleeding into the brown. The key is to have all of these elements separate. So you could work layer at a time, letting each colour dry, but if you're careful and calculated with where you place the colour, you can continue painting without taking any breaks. I also jumped back to that really dark brown to put in the railings that pop out above that yellow and red. So it's all these small little details, and it is literally just straight lines that I'm mapping in, nothing overly complicated. And because you've got that outline there, it does make things a little bit easier because you can see where each colour needs to be. And I also darkened a lot of the shadows underneath each section of the roof, as it does go over all of the red and yellow section, so the roof travels over that and then casts the shadow back onto the building. So I used some of that dark brown and went in underneath over some of the red and yellow areas straight underneath each layer of the roof, and this is just going to help map in the shadows in the right places, and that's how you finish this part of the painting. So once you've got your colours in the right place, letting it dry, going in with the dark colours just to add the shadows. So I'd focus on the colour first and then the shadows to finish. So once I was happy with the building, I made sure this was completely dry before moving on to the rest of the painting. I used the wet in wet method to create the sky. This was super easy. I added a layer of water and then dotted that blue in, made sure I blended it all together, and across all of the edge of the paper I dotted some blue and let it bleed out so that you had the natural blend out for all the edge of the painting, and you'll see this become further developed with all the other elements we're going to be adding. And I then created 3 different colours for the greenery that I wanted to add. I created a nice earth green with a little bit of brown to darken it, and I then did the exact same thing but added a little bit of blue so it was a bit more on the colder side, and then I created a lemon yellow and added a little bit of red to this just to deepen it and create that golden colour, similarly to the windows we painted towards the start of this tutorial. And all I did with all of these colours is dot it down following the reference photo. I added more of that cold green towards the bottom, the earth green towards the top. I made sure I used the earth green first, as this was more of the base colour, as it's that balance between the warm tones for the yellow and the colder tones for the darker green. And I really was careful going around the building, as I didn't want this to overlap, as the building is definitely at the forefront of this painting. And once you get to the bottom of the page with these colours, don't forget to blend this out. So I cleaned my brush and used a little bit of water going upwards into the paint to create that natural blend out, and then in all of the wet areas I dotted some of the same colours down so that natural blend and splodgy effect was created. When I added the yellow as well, because this is a completely different colour to the 2 darker greens that I had, I made sure to dot a little bit of the green into this so they blended together slightly, but that yellow definitely creeps through a lot in the reference. It's just having that blend of the colours by making sure you dot them together. I also created a really dark brown using brown and then adding a hint of blue to really deepen it up, and it made it a little bit colder. And I painted a few branches going through all of this green area. I also added the branches to the top of the page, as you've got that creeping through again in the reference. For the branch at the top of the page as well, I made sure I did the exact same thing with all of the colours. I used the earthy green to start with, dotted this down following the structure of the branches, and by this I mean dotting some over the top of the branches, around the branches, but following the general movement, so I'm not placing it as randomly as I did down towards the bottom of the page. I then used that darker, more cold green as well, dotted a little bit of that in there, and then the yellow to finish, and made made sure these blended together really nicely. Again, once I was happy with this, I moved on to the next part of the painting. For me, I wanted to work on the mountain section, as this is right in the middle of the page. You want to make sure you get this right, and we've got all of the hard elements in now. The mountain wasn't that difficult to paint, so I created a grey with a hint of blue, so I mixed blue with actually a little bit of brown, and it gave that really cold grey effect which I wanted. And I used this to paint in the mountain, putting lines going up towards the top where you've got that snow element, so keeping that really light with them little ridgy lines where the rocks would be sticking out. And I didn't bring the mountain all the way down to the bottom, as there's a ray of sunshine creeping through just underneath, so I left that bit there and then painted underneath that and blended all of this together with a little bit of water. I also added a hint of yellow into that sun ray section just to really brighten it up. Didn't add too much paint down on this, and I was really happy with the way this turned out. It gave that sort of misty, whimsical effect, which I was really happy with. So I added a tiny bit of blue as well into that white section, as I didn't want to leave it completely bare. So the blue that I used for the sky, I actually watered this down massively, adding lots of water to this, and then a gentle wash into that white section, making sure the dark grey had dried. And I also used the same colour to add this down below the mountain and in between all of the greenery where the buildings were going to go. I then of course wanted to blend out the building. As all of this is now dried, I added a light layer of water down into the right hand side where it all blends out. All of the colours that I used for the building I went back to and put them down for that natural blend out, so I matched everything up as it was blending out. And because the paper is wet, it meant that I could just dot the colours in and they did just bleed, so it really did blend out from all that detailed section. You can definitely distinctly see where that blend out begins. And then I went on to adding in the buildings. Once that light layer of blue had dried, I used the grey that I used for the dark section of the mountains and just added some little dots down. Really simple. The only thing that was very calculated was towards the top of where the buildings are. I made sure the dots were smaller and more compact as they are further away, to alter that perspective and replicate that is in the reference photo. But really simple, not overly complicated for this dotted section to finish.
Thank you so much for watching this watercolour landscape tutorial. If you've enjoyed today's video, you can find the real-time tutorial over on my Patreon. You will find the link to that down below in the description. You'll also find links to all of my social media down below, so if you like what you've seen today, make sure you follow me on TikTok for more updates on what I get up to during the week. And you'll also find the reference photo and access to both the outlines completely for free down below. Thank you again for watching. Bye guys!